Sometimes we all need to turn to convenience foods, but have you ever looked at the labels? There's got to be a better way. This meal prep hack can help solve the problem, and it's going to blow your mind. Anyone can make these. I'm going to go ahead and empty my jar into the skillet. I'm just going to simmer this for another 1 to 2 minutes, and then it's going to be done. That smells really good. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're making another meal in a jar. These magical little jars will revolutionize your pantry. These jar meals are not pressure canned, so they don't require any special equipment or any special skill to prepare. Anyone can make these. They can be shelf stable for years if they're sealed properly, so they're a great way to build up your emergency food supply. Save your family from the drive-through, takeout, and prepackaged convenience foods that are full of preservatives, bioengineered ingredients, and other things that you may not want your family eating. These homemade convenience meals are so much better than Hamburger Helper and the like because they contain everything in the jar. Your meat is in the jar, your veggies are in the jar, your sauce, dairy, everything is in there. All you need is water. It's like magic. And you control every single thing that goes in the jar. A healthy, complete meal, homemade by you, that's shelf stable for years and cooks up in a flash when you need it with only water. This checks all the boxes. The variety of different meals you can make this way is incredible. The meal I'm making today is sweet and sour chicken. We had a viewer who requested a sweet and sour chicken recipe, and it's been on my list to do for quite a while, so I decided now was a great time to do a video tutorial for you all and get this added to our library of meals in a jar recipes. So let's get started, and I'll show you what you need to make this, how to put together the jar, and then how to fix the completed meal and what it looks like when it's all done. Like I mentioned, you don't need any special equipment. You don't need a pressure canner. There's no need to worry about headspace or siphoning or jars that don't seal or any of that. All you really need is a mason jar to put your meal in. Today we're using a wide mouth quart size mason jar. That's the most typical size of jar that's used. You can also do these in Mylar bags if you don't want to use glass jars for any reason. You're going to want to have a canning funnel just to help get your ingredients into your jar more easily. And then you're just going to want some basic measuring cups and spoons. In fact, for this particular recipe today, I only need a tablespoon. And then of course, you're going to need your ingredients. For most jar meals like this, we use a lot of freeze-dried ingredients for our meats, fruits and vegetables, and dairy. And of course, you can control the quality of these ingredients. If you freeze-dry them yourself, then you're going to control that through the choices of the foods that you purchase or grow to freeze-dry. Now, I purchased all of these. I did not freeze-dry them myself, but I have a company that I really trust that I purchase from. I know that they have very high quality standards for very clean food, very fresh food. They don't allow any GMOs or any mRNA technology or anything like that in their food. So for my freeze-dried ingredients today, I'm using chopped chicken. Now you can use any form of chicken that you want. Of course, if you freeze-dry it yourself, you can use whatever you want. If you watch my channel, you know that I have a particular affinity for the chicken slices that I buy freeze-dried that are seasoned with salt. This chopped chicken is unseasoned. I'm using this because this is on sale this month, and I always try to use some recipes that use sale items, and I'll also be stocking up on this while it's on sale, so I'm going to use through some that I have. Next, we're going to use some pineapple, and then we've got some red bell peppers and green bell peppers. You could use one or the other, or a mixture of both like I'm doing. You want to make sure, though, that you don't use the mixed bell peppers that are dehydrated like I use in some of my meal in a jar recipes, because those are just a completely different animal, because they're dehydrated and not freeze-dried, and so they're not going to behave the same way in the recipe. So if you do make a substitution like that, you'd have to do some changing and some experimenting. They're also very teeny little bits, and I really wanted these bigger pieces in my jar meal. And then of course I have some onion slices. And then for the sauce ingredients, of course, I have some cornstarch. Now you can buy non-GMO cornstarch. And next you're going to use granulated brown sugar. This is also called pourable brown sugar, and this is dry. It's not moist and sticky like the typical brown sugar that you find. That's why we use this in our jar meals. I'm also using soy sauce powder, pineapple juice powder, and apple cider vinegar powder. And I will have links to all of these ingredients down in the description box below the video, because I know some of them are a little bit more difficult to find. Some of these things you can't just walk into your typical grocery store and buy off the shelf. And I will say with some of these ingredients, definitely pay attention to the brand that I use, because I have noticed in my experimenting with meals in a jar, sometimes when I use two different brands, I get very different results of certain ingredients. It's usually powdered ingredients. I have noticed it with sour cream powders. I have noticed it with cream cheese powders. It's not necessarily saying that one brand is better than the other, but it's just that they have a distinctly different flavor. So if I test a recipe with one brand and then I try it with a different brand, sometimes I get a much different result. So I will link to the exact brands that I used in testing and developing this recipe. All right, so let's get started. I'm just going to open up my jar and we are going to start with the chicken. I'm going to be doing a cup of the chicken. And next I'm going to add the pineapple. I'm also going to do a cup of pineapple. Next, I'm going to start adding some of the sauce ingredients because they're going to filter down amongst the pineapple and the chicken. I'm going to start with this granulated brown sugar, and I'm going to be adding 1/3 cup of that. So 1/3 cup of the brown sugar. Next, I'm going to be adding the cornstarch, and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Now, 2 tablespoons is the same as 1/8 cup. So if you do have a set with 1/8 cup measure, I love to use that because I only have to scoop once. But of course, not all sets have that. So you can also just use 2 tablespoons if that's what you have. So 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Next, I'm going to be adding 3 tablespoons of the apple cider vinegar powder. Now this one, it may be easier just to use 3 tablespoons because I do have it in a mason jar with the Parmesan cheese shaker lid, and so it's easy to measure just like this. 1, 2, 3. And this is one of those ingredients where I think it may matter what brand you use because you just never know between the brands if one's going to be stronger than the other or, you know, more tangy, more potent. Now I do like to either wipe off my measuring spoon in between different ingredients when I'm using ingredients like this so I don't transfer the flavors, or else I just use clean measuring spoons. I do have quite a few sets just for that specific purpose. But next I'm going to be adding 2 tablespoons of soy sauce powder. Now with these powdered ingredients, I do recommend storing these in mason jars with this type of lid on them because they can tend to clump if they get moisture in them at all. And I have stored them in jars like this for a very long period of time and not had any issues with clumping. But I've definitely had these types of ingredients clump when I've stored them in other containers. Next, I'm going to be adding 1 tablespoon of the pineapple juice powder. 1 tablespoon of that. I'm going to give this a good shake and a tap just to get all those ingredients down in. And now I'm going to be adding the rest of my veggies. I'm going to start with the red bell pepper. So 1/2 cup of red and also 1/2 cup of the green bell pepper. And like I mentioned, you could do all of one or the other if you preferred, or if that's all you had. You definitely don't have to do both. You could also do another type of veggie in there if you wanted. I was just thinking Actually, when I went to grab my green bell peppers, I almost grabbed the green beans because I thought that said green bell peppers. So I actually started thinking that would probably be really good in this. Green beans, broccoli might be good in here. There's other vegetable substitutions that you can make. And I know a lot of people do talk about, you know, how they really want to get started, but they don't have all the ingredients they need. So you can definitely make substitutions. Like with the meats, like I said, you could use any type of chicken. So if your recipe calls for, I typically do recipes with 3 different types of chicken, but one type of chicken, just pick your favorite or pick the one that goes on sale or the least expensive, or if it's chicken that you freeze dry yourself, you know, use whatever you have. And then you can pick one beef, for example, the ground beef or the Hamburg would probably sub in for just about any beef. And then of course you can substitute different vegetables based on your family's tastes and based on what you happen to have available. So next I'm going to be doing the onion slices. Now I have 2 different types of freeze-dried onions. I have slices and I have chopped onions, which are the little small diced pieces. I wanted a larger slice for this dish. I'm going to be doing 1/2 cup of these as well. And now our jar is pretty full and our recipe is complete. There's just enough space here to add an oxygen absorber on the top. So if you were going to be storing this for a considerable amount of time, you'd want to do that. This does have some sugar in it with the brown sugar. Oxygen absorbers can tend to make sugars turn into a brick, but this sugar should be okay because it's just a little bit and it did filter down among here. So there's no big area of sugar that's going to turn hard. It's all divided up into small little pockets. I am not going to use an oxygen absorber today because I'm going to be cooking this up to show you how it comes out. So I'm just going to go ahead and put on my lid. If you do want to use oxygen absorbers, I would typically use 200 cc's for a jar like this. And we usually serve this over some white rice. So if you want, you can actually put up a jar of some instant white rice. It doesn't have to be instant, but in the case of an emergency when you want things to cook quickly and not to use a lot of fuel, instant can be a good thing. And 2 cups of instant white rice is just about the perfect amount for this recipe. For the amount of sweet and sour chicken that we get out of this recipe. So if you want to just use a pint jar, that's what I'm going to do, is go ahead and put 2 cups of rice into this pint jar. And this would be especially good if you're giving this as a gift, to have the rice to go alongside. That is a little full, so I'm just going to tip a little bit out of that. And there is the perfect amount of rice to go along with our sweet and sour chicken. Now, of course, you could also use instant brown rice if you'd rather have brown rice. And they also have instant jasmine rice, which would probably be good. Now, if you typically put butter or salt or anything like that in your rice when you cook it, you can go ahead and add salt to this jar, and you could even add butter powder. I honestly don't typically put that in my rice. I usually just cook just the rice with the water. So that's something that's a personal preference. Now, to fix this up today, I'm going to use my emergency butane burner. This is what we would use to cook in a power outage. Butane is generally considered safe to cook indoors with. And this is a great skillet meal. A skillet like this is the perfect size to cook this up. I'm going to go ahead and empty my jar into the skillet. Now, when you're making jar meals like this, remember that you do have graduated markings on the side of your jar. It's a little bit hard to read here, but it measures in cups, so you can use this jar to measure your water. And I'm definitely going to do that with this meal because you can see all the powder that kind of is stuck to the inside of the jar, the residual powder. So I want to make sure that all of that gets into my recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and measure my 3 cups of water right in this jar. We're going to be using 3 cups of water for this dish. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just pour in my 3 cups of water. Now this is cold water. We're starting with cold water for this meal. And I'm just going to go ahead and mix this until all of the ingredients are blended. I want to make sure that all the sauce ingredients get blended and don't make any lumps. So I'm going to blend this while it's cold. And this also gives a chance for all of these freeze-dried ingredients to get a start at refreshing before we start cooking it and the sauce starts thickening up. I love the way you really see the vegetables come back to life when you add the water. So now that this is well blended and the sauce ingredients are all mixed into the water and everything has been moistened, I'm going to go ahead and put the heat on. I'm just going to bring this up to a simmer. And at that point, I'll turn it down and put a lid on it. And this honestly really only needs to cook about 5 minutes. And it's done. The sauce will thicken. The chicken will be soft. If you use a larger piece of chicken, like the chicken slices that I mentioned, or maybe some chicken that you freeze-dried yourself that's cut into larger pieces, then you may need to cook it a little bit longer to make sure that they get rehydrated all the way through. But for these small pieces, just about 5 minutes has been doing it for me. While we wait for that to heat, I just wanted to show you, I just went out and bought 6 of these canning funnels. These are the ones from Walmart, and these are like $2 a piece. And I have several of them, but honestly, when you make a whole bunch of jar meals at once, probably the most difficult part is actually moving the canning funnel from jar to jar. So I figured for $2 a piece, I might as well have a bunch of them. So I grabbed 6 more. So if I'm making 10 or 12 jars, I can just have a funnel in each jar, and that's going to make it a lot easier, I think. You can see these pieces of pineapple starting to come back to life as well. This pineapple is so delicious, even just to snack on right out of the can. That is my favorite thing, but it's really good in this dish also. Okay, so this is starting to bubble, so I'm going to turn this down as low as I can get it, because this is a pretty strong burner. I'm going to go ahead and put a lid on this. I'm going to set it for 5 minutes, and then I'll check it, and I'll see if the chicken is refreshed and the pineapple, and if the sauce is thickened, and if it needs to go a little bit longer, then I'll let it go a little bit longer. Alrighty, so it's been 5 minutes. I'm going to let this simmer just another minute with the lid off to thicken this sauce a little bit more. But I'm going to see if a piece of chicken and a piece of pineapple have softened up enough. I'm just going to simmer this for another 1 to 2 minutes, and then it's going to be done. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and now this is going to thicken up as it cools off a little bit. And while that is cooling off, I'm just going to get started on the rice. All I have to do is put 2 cups of water in a saucepan. I'm sure most of you are familiar with how to cook instant rice. Just bring that to a boil, and then I'm just going to turn the heat off, stir in the rice, and put a lid on it and let it set right on that hot burner, but the burner's going to be off. And then within a few minutes, it's going to be ready to go. Okay guys, see how easy that was? Now you have another recipe to add to your meal in a jar collection. We will have a printable recipe card for you. I'll link that down in the description below. To print these, you just save it to your phone or your computer like a picture, and then you print it as you would a picture. We do include a version with a color picture and a simple black and white version with no picture. Remember, it's always best to try any new recipe once to make sure that your family likes it. Then you can make any tweaks you want if you need to adjust the salt or the seasoning to your family's taste, for example. But once you're sure it's a keeper, then it's almost just as fast and easy to make up multiple jars as it is to make one. That's a great way to build your emergency food plan meal by meal. Make a dozen jars of this meal and you'll have enough to eat this meal once a month for a year, twice a month for 6 months, or once a week for 3 months, for example. With a collection of several recipes that your family likes, you can build out a whole rotation of several months worth of homemade convenience meals. You'll be covered in an emergency or a power outage, but you can also reach for these anytime you just need a quick and easy meal. They also make great gifts, camping meals. There's so many ways you can use these jar meals. If you like this idea, be sure to check out and join my Meal in a Jar group on Facebook. It's full of really great people sharing tips and advice, recipes and stories, and we would love to have you. I'll put that link in the video description as well. I really hope that your family enjoys this meal as much as we did. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a jar emoji down in the comments and check out this playlist next for some more Meal in a Jar recipes. I'm Jera with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.